Hey guys, good morning. I apologize for the delay on chapter 8, so I wanted to hop on just real quick. It's pretty short, but I wanted to give you a quick little overview of the chapter 8 material that is going to be important for the AP exam. And later today, I'll get chapter 9 done. So while I was thinking about it, I just wanted to hop on and get this posted. And then, like I said, I'll post chapter 9 later today, and then chapter 10 we'll post sometime tomorrow. So when we talk about chapter 8, it's motivation and emotion and stress. So some of the theories of motivation, just to start, that have come up on recent exams. One is the drive reduction theory, which remember is very simply that achieving that goal of homeostasis. So with drive reduction, there is a drive, a tension that is created by some type of physiological need. So we have a need for food, we have a need for water. That's what creates that drive within us, that hunger, that thirst, and it usually causes tension that we want to relieve. So the whole idea is that we seek to reduce that drive, hence drive reduction. And so we do so by eating or drinking or whatever. Remember, homeostasis is just that steady internal state. Now, one thing that has also come up, and I apologize, I didn't put it in here, but that will be important, is that you understand the role of incentives. So as human beings, remember, we don't just simply, oh, I'm hungry, so I eat. We talked about in class how we are pushed by our internal biology, but we are pulled by external incentives. So if you're really hungry and you're offered, leftover broccoli casserole, you probably aren't as motivated to eat that as if someone offers you, Skyline or pizza or Chipotle or something like that. So remember how incentives, those external things, play a role in those drives. And in our motivation. Then there's the arousal theory. And so we talked about how as human beings, we don't just want to be, have a drive and reduce it. We will get bored. Sometimes we want to have a higher level of arousal. We seek out arousal. So this theory kind of explains why people, are thrill seekers. Why do people ride big roller coasters and go bungee jumping or, rock climbing? And so the theory of motivation is that we as human beings and even animals seek out, higher levels or optimum levels of arousal. And so with that, make sure that you also know, because I know this was on in the last couple of years, the Yerkes-Dodson law was on an FRQ, and that is just that law that says, we need to find that optimum level of arousal for our best performance. We don't want too much. Once arousal gets too high, it can then hurt performance, but that we need to find that optimum level of arousal for our best performance. Okay, so not too much, not too little. I preached Maslow to you all year, but just make sure in the hierarchy of needs you go through and you understand what Maslow's hierarchy says, especially make sure that you understand self-actualization, which is that getting to that point where we've achieved our own potential in life. So as an individual, reaching those goals, meeting that potential, that fulfillment. And that's kind of his focus with self-actualized people. And so make sure that you are familiar there. One other thing I want to mention here, I teach this in chapter 6. And actually it's come up on the AP exam a couple of times, and I didn't include it in chapter 6, so I apologize. And that's the over-justification effect. The reason it's here in chapter 8, but for some people, is because it goes along with intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, which I talked to you about in chapter 6. Intrinsic, obviously, doing things because we enjoy them. So intrinsic motivation is I, do things because of the sheer joy of it. I go running because I enjoy doing that, or exercising, or rock climbing, or whatever it may be. There's nothing external, nothing outside that's motivating me to do that. Where external is obviously there's a motivation. So over justification, just to remind you, is when we are, and this is why it came up for us in chapter 6, is because when we are reinforcing a behavior that is already intrinsically motivating. So I'm already have intrinsic motivation to read. Okay. So I really enjoy reading, just the joy of reading. But now, if somebody is making me read or telling me to read, and then I will get an incentive or reinforced, with a grade or whatever, all of a sudden that loses its intrinsic value. That's what over justification is. When we are reinforcing a behavior that is already intrinsically motivated, it loses that intrinsic value. And I believe the example I gave you in class was talking about professional athletes who play a sport that they love and they've played it their whole life, but it starts to lose some of that intrinsic value as they get into the professional level where they're being paid, and it is something now all of a sudden, instead of wanting to do it, it's something that they have to. So okay, moving on into hunger. I don't think your hunger hormones will probably be, I hate to say they're not going to be on there, and then they are. But I think that the biggest thing with hunger is making sure you understand the role of the brain. Obviously, the hypothalamus is what plays a role in hunger, communicating with all of your endocrine function to, produce insulin from the pancreas when we eat and we become full, or for when we are have an empty stomach, releasing the hormones like ghrelin or orexin that cause us to feel hungry. So I would just make sure it is the hypothalamus. The lateral stimulates hunger, releasing orexin. The ventromedial sends full signals. Glance over those hormones, but just make sure overall you kind of understand the role of the brain and the endocrine system in hunger. Moving on to emotions, what has most commonly come up is the two-factor theory, the Sachter-Singer. Just real quick, James Lange, remember, that is the theory that says we have first our physiological arousal that then leads to our experienced emotion. So I gave you the example of almost getting into a car accident. My body responds first. I have increased heart rate, breathing, and then my awareness of my physiological arousal leads to the experience of fear or anger or whatever it may be. Cannon disagrees with that because they say emotions are too similar as far as the way our body responds for body response to trigger specific emotions. So Cannon says that your physiological arousal and your emotion are two completely separate but simultaneous things. They happen at the same time, but one is not affecting the other. They are two separate things. And then there's the two-factor theory. And the two-factor theory, remember, Sachter and Singer, and you may see the names, you may see two-factor theory, you may see both, but just make sure you know that they are interchangeable. This is basically that high road. The Sachter-Singer theory says that in order for us to experience emotion, it is the physiological arousal that fuels it, but it's the cognitive label that is what channels the emotion we experience. So how we cognitively label a situation is what is going to determine the emotion that we experience. So again, I talked about being interrupted while watching your favorite show. So physiological arousal is there. Who interrupts you? Annoying younger sibling, or, your crush or boyfriend or girlfriend. That can change the emotion you experience based on how you cognitively label that situation. And then, so going into the whole high road, low road thing, the high road says that when we have some type of a fear, not fierce, but fear stimulus is what's in your notes, but some type of an emotion evoking stimulus, that first from the thalamus, it goes to your prefrontal cortex here, that we actually interpret and consciously, kind of work out what's going on before we respond with, in this case, the amygdala with fear. where that emotional low road says that fear stimulus or whatever that emotion evoking stimulus is goes directly from the thalamus to the amygdala, causing a fear response before there's been any conscious interpretation of what's going on. So, for example, your friend's hiding, jumps out and scares you. That fear stimulus of them jumping out when you're not expecting it goes directly from the thalamus to the amygdala. You feel fear before you've had a chance to interpret, that this is just one of my friends playing a prank on me. Okay, that there's not actually danger, but we feel that without any conscious interpretation. Okay, so then I put, I know it was a little redundant, I apologize, but the theory or the charts for the theories, I just wanted you guys to do some examples and make sure that you know them, that you're comfortable with them on your own. As far as expressed emotion, remember, as far as men and women go, women show a lot more emotion on their face than men do. We looked at that study of men and women viewing emotional films, sad, happy, scary, and we saw a lot more of emotion being displayed on the face of women than men. So that's where there's a gender influence. And then when it comes to culture, remember, facial expression is the same no matter where you live, what culture, what part of the world. A smile is a smile, frown is a frown. So we can, now how much we use, how much expression, that's called display rules. So every culture may be a little different with how much emotion we actually show on our face. But from a cultural standpoint, being able to read emotions just from expression is universal. The last thing that I want to touch on, and then I'm going to let you go, I told you I would keep this short, is the general adaptation syndrome. So when we talk about stress and our body's response to stress, remember, stress, which is psychological, it's all, how we interpret things that go on in our life, our stressors, which are different from person to person. Stress is all about our interpretation. And so that's where we talk about the psychoneuroimmunology. How does the psychological then affect, the neurological, the endocrine function, which, affects our health? So general adaptation syndrome says the way that when we respond to stress, there are 3 phases. And this has come up, and I believe, let me double check. Yeah, it looks like all 3 phases have been asked about on the recent FRQs. So remember that first phase is the alarm phase. So alarm phase is going to be when that stressor actually occurs. So, whether that's the death of a loved one, or whether that is, a big, exam that you have to take, or, whether that's a big show you're going to perform in. Alarm is that, very first phase, and then it's resistance, and that's the longest phase. So that phase 2 is the really long, like your body's coping with that stressor. Those are the long nights of staying up studying, or the long nights of rehearsal and practice. And, this is when our body is going through the hard part. It's trying to resist the stress, all the while our sympathetic nervous system is activated, our heart rate's up, our respiration is up. Then we hit phase 3, which is exhaustion. This is when our bodies have just had enough, and this is when we can give in to the stress, and this is when a lot of people get sick. So we talked about this at the end of exam week. A lot of people end up getting sick. A lot of people who are in the plays or in marching band or who play sports at the end of a season, we end up getting sick. And that's because our bodies are just exhausted from, taking in and enduring all of the stress that we've been trying to resist. Okay, so that was a short one. I know. I definitely didn't cover every single thing in the chapter. I tried to hit all of the important stuff from chapter 8. So, take that, go with it, study what you need to. But I will tell you right now, chapter 9 is a bigger one because it's development. So later on today, I will, I'm going to finish putting those grades in first. Looks like most of you've turned it in at this point. I will get chapter 9 posted here in a few hours. So you have that. And then once I get chapter 10, all those turned in and graded, tomorrow morning, I'll put up the chapter 10 review, and that will be it. We'll be done. Because remember, I put chapter 11 in with 7. So, those of you who watch these, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we will have a Zoom meeting, or not Zoom, sorry, a Google Meet later today. I will send out invites for today, tomorrow, and Monday for anybody who wants to jump on, ask questions. All right, guys, thanks so much. Okay.